Hello, this is Eliza, and I'd like to thank you for joining us on our YouTube videos. The name of my website is angelicmercy.com, and if you wish to contact me for a reading, my email is angelicmercy44@gmail.com. Today I'd like to touch on the topic of astrology as related to greatness. Specifically, I would like to analyze briefly the chart of Elijah Cummings, who passed this past Wednesday, October 16th at 2:30 a.m. in Baltimore, Maryland. Elijah Cummings had a very high degree of Capricorn as his sun. I did not know his exact time of birth, but through studying several charts of people that have considered what they thought to be his rising sign, I finally did agree that I thought he was in Aries rising 1 degree, and that that would place his late degree Capricorn rising sun in the 11th house of Aquarius, which is the humanitarian, someone that is leading a large group of people, but also not having to be known as the leader, just as easily able to be humble to somebody to whom he felt he could learn something from, such as Martin Luther King or other members of Congress. He was in Congress for 21 years. When I look at his chart, one thing really stands out for me in this chart. It is not the chart of somebody that I would consider to be intimate. Not that he couldn't have great friendships. Aquarian influences over Capricorn. They have great friends. They are loved by their friends. And Capricorns usually achieve their highest level of accomplishment in later life. So in early life, they often have a very tough life. Sometimes they come from very humble beginnings, such as Elijah Cummings came from parents that were true sharecroppers, and his parents left a great indelible mark on him for their decency, their hardworking sense of honor in their lives. And he gave one quick story where he said that the day he was sworn into Congress, his father had tears in his eyes, and he said, "I'd never seen my father cry before," which is typical of a Capricorn, to have a more non-emotional upbringing, especially with the father energy, because it's a father-ruled sign. Although it's a feminine sign attached to the mother, the father leaves an impact on the son. And he said he came up to his father later after the swearing in, and his father said to him, he said, "Why are you in tears?" He goes, "I'm not in tears that you are being sworn in. I'm in tears at the thought that I could be where you are had I been born in a different era." And that was something Elijah took to heart. Elijah Cummings never forgot his upbringing. He never went ahead in his life and forgot where he came from. He always went back to his roots. He lived near the same neighborhood where he grew up. He walked the streets where he had been a child. He had amazing simpatico, always with people that had very little, and he had great devotion to making the world more balanced, to making the world more just. His Saturn was in Libra. It's actually his most exalted planet in the chart. Saturn is in its, excuse me, I just have to plug in my phone here. It's going to go off as I'm doing this. Sorry about that. Not that great on some of this stuff. Okay, just 1 second. We'll pull this up here. There we go. So Saturn being exalted in Libra means that was the most powerful planet in his chart. It is the chart. I mean, his sun in Capricorn is not sitting in its natural sign, but Saturn in Libra, his karmic mission that he came in to express in this lifetime was to bring justice to the earth, to fight for justice, to bring equality at all levels, not just racially, but monetarily, for people that had illness, to be caring about having a compassionate mercy for them, to bring justice to people that were homeless, that people that were the underdog. So that sun in the house of Aquarius and that Saturn in Libra gave a tremendous drive within his soul to live out a humanitarian life. Now, when one looks at an astrology chart, where two people born the same moment, brought in exactly the same city, the level of evolution of that soul will express what is the greatness. So we are all going to be met by incredible challenges and obstacles on our path. How we respond to those obstacles is related to the evolution of our soul and the purity of our intentions and the integrity of staying close to our true being. Elijah Cummings got up every day and most times attended the early bird church service at 7:15 before he would go to Congress. So he was deeply devoted to values. He was not dogmatic about his religion, but he clung and expressed and was inspired by the beauty of the core essence values that came through his religious soul. So he was very much aligned to his church, to the music, to the feeling that he had to account to something higher than his own being. And so that kept him on the path, that kept him on the straight and narrow. And when he had profound racial issues that he had to confront, when he watched his beloved friend Martin Luther King be killed, or when he himself was personally beaten, he never took on the role of the victim. The light from within him, the courage, the evolution of his soul pulled him forward and made him even more determined on his path to purify and to hold to the American Constitution, to honor his fellow man on whatever side of the aisle they were sitting, and to be somebody that was always looking for a higher and better expression of himself. He examined himself daily. And I think one of the signs of greatness in a human being is their capacity to look at themselves and to continually remake, redefine, and revolutionize the personal ego, so that the strength of the ego is used for the betterment of all and not for the betterment of self. So he was not a man of self-interest. He was a man of universal expression, universal sense of responsibility to all beings, to all of life. And his wife said that up until the last moment he was working. He was signing subpoenas, and he was, making sure that his message was carried forth, because he cared so much about where the country was headed at this time. The reason I say that his chart was not an intimate chart It's not, it's the chart of a man that if he married, which he did twice, a man that would marry for somebody of like cause, like values, and a similarity of purpose. He has a moon in Gemini, which is not an interpersonal moon. It's a moon that expresses its emotional nature mostly through the mind, through thought processes. His sun in Capricorn is expressing the highest aspect of Capricorn, which is the highest aspect of Capricorn to me is one that climbs with the knowledge that what one is climbing for is globally and for the family and for the race he came from and for the country, the highest and best direction. So what he was building was always for everybody involved, not, although he was a good man and I'm sure a good husband, the time that he would have allotted to family and home was probably still a man that was bringing his work home and doing tremendous, feeling tremendous responsibility always to look after that aspect of life first. So his work would have taken priority. As we've talked before, the North Node in the chart is where the soul came in to express. What did the soul wish to accomplish? What was its highest and best intention? And his North Node was in Pisces. So I would call that the North Node that has to learn the aspect of serve or suffer. In other words, it's not a victimized North Node. It's somebody that's come here from a South Node of Virgo, very one-pointed, very focused, very caught up in the details of life. And in this life has come in to learn to diffuse his personality and to become one with all types of human beings and to learn how to be utterly compassionate to all of humanity. So he may have come in with a one-pointed mission to help his people, his race. And then as time went by, that desire to help, that desire to serve, that desire to bring forth justice spilled over into all of life, bringing forth humanitarian, compassionate heart to all of existence. So he's somebody that would have gone from being probably quite opinionated when he was younger and hung up on certain details to somebody that became a phenomenal listener in later years and very kind and compassionate and loving. I would feel him to have become a sweeter person as the years went by, a more gentle person, a more humble person, because Pisces is realizing that it is part of everything. So it's not hung up in its own being and its own opinions, its own I'm here to serve, but more I'm part of all of life and we're all here to help each other. The other part of his chart that is very, very beautiful is his Jupiter is in Pisces. So his Jupiter, his gift from God, because I look at Jupiter in the chart as the gift that God gave you when you came in. He already was a tremendously compassionate man. He already was a man that understood spirituality and probably was living in a spiritual either ashram or monastery or some kind of spiritual monastic existence in another life, and brought in that capacity to feel the presence of God through every action that he took. God literally was guiding his hand. God literally was guiding his heart and his voice and his actions. So one could look at this chart, and if this was not somebody coming in at the highest evolutionary level, one could see that this chart with the Jupiter in the 12th and the North Node in the 12th could have been somebody that would have had a tendency to fall into more addictive behaviors or not to be grounded in reality or things like that. But because the evolution of the soul was so profound, and his sense of that Saturn in Libra, that justice for all, was so highly highlighted in this chart, sitting right on his descendant. And his descendant is the people. It is the American people. So he came here with a goal to become one with, first to become one with his race and to fight for his race and to never forget where he came from. But then to come to such a place of universal compassion that was almost a Christ-like force to his being. And I think that's why he was so beloved by so many and reached the soul of so many. I remember when the Pope came over and he was speaking in the government, and afterwards he came out to greet everybody, and Elijah Cummings knelt and kissed his hand. He wasn't Catholic, Elijah Cummings, but he honored the man who, to his heart, was representing Christ on earth. And no matter what the scandals around the Catholic Church or what was going on, he was honoring the deeper path of the Pope. And I remember watching that and crying to see the humility. And the Pope leaned over and lifted him up and held him in his arms with deep compassion. This was 2 or 3 years ago when he came. And you could see that he knew who Elijah Cummings was and felt the same deference and humility and homage to his grace and his merciful heart. So it was really quite a moment, and I think that to me embodied him, that he stood very humbly back and then came forward as the Pope was coming toward them and showed utter humility and homage to the Christ within, not to the man, to the Christ within, to what that embodied. He had when we look at a chart, we look where the Venus sits in the chart, and the Venus is our love nature. It is our ideals. His Venus was in his house of Aquarius, in Aquarius. So again, that is somebody that is here to use the love nature for all of humanity, not just in the marriage with the mate or with the family, but literally a love nature that was here to be shared with the world, with all of life, with all of creation. It's a beautiful Venus, again, not the most intimate Venus at a one-on-one level. But that does not mean as a friend with all that beautiful Pisces that he didn't have that compassionate way to look into your eyes and feel your pain and sorrow and understand your journey. But day to day, one-on-one, every moment with one person, I do not see this as a chart of a man that would have wanted to put all his life and effort into that one area. It would be more to all. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that his Uranus was at 6 degrees Cancer in his 4th house. When I looked at his chart, when I looked at his progress chart, which is the chart that you move. It's the soul chart. On his soul chart, and I won't go into the whole progress chart today, we'll talk about it another time, but his progress sun was at 6 degrees Aries. So it had just come into his first house of his natal chart, but it was squaring his natal Uranus, which meant somebody that could have been ill for a while, could have been going through their troubles, but all of a sudden Uranus just took them out very quickly. The death was, even though there was struggle and hospice for a little while there, and he was still going into Congress and heading up investigations on a walker with oxygen at times. That shows his tenacity of spirit, his incredible valor, and that Aries capacity to keep on keeping on as an instigator. So it was squaring on that day, and I looked at his chart of when he died, because I always like to look at the chart of when somebody crosses over, because when they cross over, that is their rebirth chart. And his rebirth chart was very, very beautiful. It was a sun in Libra, moon in Taurus. It was, and it was showing that sun completing the journey of Saturn in Libra. And it was showing the sun at a major number, 22 degrees, and Jupiter in Sagittarius, squaring his Jupiter exactly. So it was showing a sense of completion in his chart. And Jupiter that day was squaring Pluto. And Pluto was sextiling his natal Jupiter. So there's a lot of feeling of this man has done what he came here to do, and because he lived, the greatness that I see through his chart is that he lived out his moon, which was in Gemini, expressing his verbal capability to fight for values. His moon was sitting in the house of values. His Saturn in Libra, he fulfilled his karmic destiny of fighting for justice and seeing that justice was his main focus his entire life. His sun in Capricorn in his 11th house, he was climbing the ladder for humanity. And the North Node in Pisces, attaining a universal oneness with, I feel, all of the essence of being itself. I don't worry about praying for his soul. I ask him to pray for us, to join us, to oversee us, to help us with his radiant light, and give great gratitude for such a great soul having come to the earth and given so much inspiration to so many. May we hold him all in our hearts as an example of angelic mercy. He truly embodied it. Thank you for listening, for walking with me, for sharing the life of a remarkable soul. God be with you, and may we all grow in our own capacity to have mercy for each other and grow in wisdom. God bless you.